In a small apartment in New York, in a Polish household, Danny and his mother host a betting salon. Their customers are mostly old men betting on horse races. After the race ends, his mother collects and dispenses money, as per the wins and losses. Thereafter, they sit down for lunch. Even though it's just two of them, there is a third plate set out. Danny starts eating, but his mother stops him. She asks him to wait for the third person to join. Danny is frustrated, but adheres to her. Just then the telephone rings. The caller states it's a collect call from a correctional facility by his brother, Darren. Danny gets annoyed, but takes the call and asks Darren his whereabouts. Darren informs him that he is in jail, being held for misdemeanor, and he needs Danny's help. He further explains that he has a deal going on, and needs Danny to pretend to be him, and go and deliver a briefcase. He reassures him that there's nothing to worry about. Moreover, it would earn Darren $1,500, which he desperately needs. This makes Danny realize it's a nefarious scheme, and so he refuses to get in the middle of whatever Darren is into. But Darren asks to speak to their mom, and after hearing Darren out, his mom asks Danny to help him, no matter the situation. Darren explains to Danny that he is supposed to meet a person at a particular place, collect the suitcase, get into a car with them, and exchange it with a girl holding a green purse. Danny asks the name of who he is supposed to meet, but Darren runs out of time on his call from the prison, and the warden disconnects the call. On the other side of town, a girl, Ellie, gets on the train without the ticket. The ticket checker steps into the compartment, and seeing him, she rushes to the restroom, but he catches her and asks her to get off the train. She gets off and walks to a cafe, where she meets with a man, Scott. They discuss a job, and Ellie asks him for more money for it, but he ridicules her demand. He informs her that she needs to deliver a briefcase, but denies knowing the contents. He gives her the car keys to a red Nissan, and a burner phone. The next morning, both Ellie and Danny get up and get ready for the day in their particular homes. Ellie arrives at the pre-decided location, and waits for Darren to show up. Danny takes half a day off from his day job at a restaurant and walks down to the location. He finds the car and looks inside for the driver. Ellie, who is standing nearby smoking, looks at him and asks him if he is the guy, as neither knows the other's name. Danny says yes, and she gestures to him to get into the car. They head out to the location from where they need to collect the briefcase. Both of them are a bit jumpy and uneasy. Danny is very nervous, as it's his first time. Ellie is also a bit anxious. Neither of them speaks, but the silence adds to the rising tension they both feel. Danny asks her if she knows the person who is handing them the briefcase, and she denies it. They arrive and wait in the car by the curb. They look around anxiously. Just then, somebody taps the window on Danny's side. The man instructs them to keep the car running, and lower the rear window and wait. The man rushes back inside. The tension in the car is almost palpable as they wait for him to return. A few minutes later, they hear an alarm going off. They both look at each other, on the verge of panicking. When the man runs out of the car, he places the briefcase inside the car and runs away. They hear someone shouting, just as Ellie pulls out of the curb and starts driving. Danny worries that the person chasing the man saw the car plates. Ellie drives them to the train station, where Danny is supposed to exchange the bag with the woman carrying the green purse. Ellie wishes him luck as he gets out of the car and drives off. Danny goes up the stairs to the platform. As he steps out on it, he spots a woman sitting there with a teal-green purse. She nods at him, like a regular nod, but he misinterprets it as an acknowledgement of being the person he is meant to exchange the case with. As another train stops, Danny sets the briefcase down beside her laptop case, which she has placed down on the ground beside the bench, and takes the laptop bag and gets on the train. He is extremely nervous. As the train doors shut, he spots another woman with a green purse sitting on another bench, with a similar briefcase beside her. He realizes his mistake, but is unable to do anything as the train starts moving. He looks on at the girl frantically as she stares back at him. Confused. Full on panicked, he waits for the train to stop at the next station, and runs out the minute the doors open. Ellie, on the other hand, parks the car, leaves the keys in the dash, and calls Scott to inform him the job is done. She disposes of the SIM card and walks away. Danny runs and arrives at the previous station, looking for the woman whose bag he is holding, but finds her gone, along with the suitcase. Just then, he spots Ellie climbing up the stairs to the station and approaches her, relieved. He tries to ask for her help, but she ignores him. Desperate, he follows her as she turns and walks away. He dodges her, pleading for her to listen to him, and tells her about his brother Darren, and how he wasn't even supposed to be there. He requests her to help him. Ellie realizes how they are both in trouble. He informs her about delivering the bag to the wrong woman. Ellie curses him, and he blurts out that he didn't know anything else other than the $1,500 they were to be paid. Ellie is shocked to hear that, as she wasn't told about the money. She asks him for his phone to make a call, but he doesn't have a phone, as he never paid the bill. They run around, trying to get to a phone to make a call. On the other side, Scott and his cronies are in a garden. Scott's associate, Russell, curses him for handling the job badly, about the misdelivered suitcase. Just then, Scott gets a call from Ellie. He asks her if they have the case, and she gets mad at him for lying to her about the money. Just then, Danny finds a prescription bottle with an address in the laptop bag. She informs Scott that they might have a lead on the case, and he promises to pay her the full amount. She asks for double, and he agrees with a condition to bring Danny, along to meet them with the case, and she can take Darren's share too. She accepts. Danny is unaware of the whole thing. Ellie and Danny go to Grand Central Station. From there, they take a train to go to the woman's place, based on the address mentioned on her medicine bottle. All through the train journey, Danny stares at Ellie, trying to figure out what she is about, while she pretends to read a book. As they get off, he shares his name with her, and asks about hers. She refuses to divulge, he accepts that, but continues to draw her into a conversation until she relents, and talks to him about being from Pittsburgh, and living with a guy called Ricky. Danny shares having a pet lizard named Ricky as a kid. They develop a sort of reluctant camaraderie. As they walk through the upscale neighborhood looking for the woman's house, Danny tries to engage Ellie in conversation. He shares his wish to become a chef and go away from home, and how he saw a job opening for a chef in Sacramento. He asks her about her life and what she does. She lies to him about being a bartender, but when Danny starts talking more about it, she gets defensive and blurts out that she worked at a strip club. Danny takes that in his stride, which makes her more upset and angrier, and she starts defending herself, saying she was only a waitress and didn't sleep around. Danny explains that he was just curious. Danny is very innocent in his outlook toward the world, while Ellie feels as if everyone is judging or using her. As they continue walking, Ellie feels they are circling, and checks one of the post boxes outside the house. Danny cautions her, as it is a crime to check through someone's mail. Just then, a man driving by in an SUV stops and asks them about their reason for being there. They try to lie their way out of it, but he snidely suggests calling the cops, and they apologize and walk away. They finally find the house. They ring the doorbell, and a young girl opens the door, tells them to collect it from the living room, and goes inside. Ellie and Danny look at each other in surprise. Ellie asks Danny if it's the same woman, and he says the woman at the station was older. They walk in cautiously. Ellie even calls out to the girl, but nobody answers. She spots a pet lizard and calls Danny over. Ellie wonders aloud why parents allow kids to have pets that don't live very long, and Danny explains that maybe it is the way for parents to prepare kids to face more difficult losses in the future. Ellie looks at him curiously. As they walk around the house, Danny shares an interesting tidbit about lizards having a long lifespan. Ellie asks him why his pet didn't make it. He says it was because of his living conditions. They are in the upstairs bedroom looking for the briefcase, or even the girl who opened the door to them, but find neither. Just then, Danny spots the SUV guy driving to the house. He alerts Ellie. They panic and try to leave, but the man comes inside, and they realize they are in his house. They hide in the bedroom, and with no option left, they jump out the window. They run through the backyard, where they find the girl sitting out on the porch listening to music. She looks at them blankly as they run away. Danny has had enough, hands Ellie his ID and asks her to run away, as he plans to go back to the house and ask the man directly for the briefcase. He assures her that he will lie about himself if he is caught. Ellie dissuades him and pulls him back. She explains that the whole family has seen him, so he will get caught. He says he is ready to take the fall, as he made the mistake, but she reminds him about the money, and that she needs it to get away from her unfortunate circumstances. She is trying to get away from Pittsburgh and start afresh. He finally relents and decides to wait the night out, and go back to the house again once the family leaves for work, so that they can look for the case in peace. They go to the nearest bar. Ellie calls Scott from there to inform him about the delay, and that they will come to him by the next day. Danny calls his mother to explain the situation, but she sympathizes with Darren instead of Danny, who is caught in the situation by no fault of his own. She asks him to come home and cook dinner, as the bedders will soon start to drop in for the evening, and just let Darren handle it. Danny refuses to return and disconnects the phone. Later, he and Ellie go to the carnival for dinner. There, they walk through the attraction, happily seeing all the kids enjoying themselves. They discuss more about each other. Ellie asks Danny about his girlfriends. Danny shares how he was seeing a girl for some time, who lived in his building. Ellie jokes about his almost invisible mustache, alluding to the fact that he is too young. He shares another anecdote about himself from high school, when he won a bet with his friends for getting close to a girl called Rebecca Vergas. Ellie is charmed by his inexperience, and teases him about it. They have a sweet moment watching the vendor roll cotton candy. Later that night, they decide to sleep in the pool shed of the house they are staking out. Danny is worried, but Ellie reassures him that no one will check the pool shed at night. With her encouragement, he agrees and thinks of it as an adventure. As they sit in the pool shed, they talk more about their lives. Danny shares how he works at an Italian place as a cook, but has never been to Italy. Rather, he's never been anywhere else, only going as far as Providence once. Ellie has been to Italy, but the place was shady, apart from the touristy spots. Danny wonders if the people she went with were shady, and not the place. Ellie gets offended, but when he apologizes, she begs pardon in turn, and explains she is irritable because she feels cold. He suggests cuddling to share body warmth. She warns him not to try and take undue advantage of the situation. He laughs, claiming he is too scared of her to try anything. Scott is in the car with Russell when he hears the message Ellie left for him. Russell subtly threatens him to break off their association, but he reassures him it's going to work out. Just then, Darren calls him and tells him he was delayed, and he will be coming to him soon. Scott is shocked upon discovering Darren is not with Ellie. Ellie wakes up and finds herself turned toward Danny, cradled in his arms, while he sleeps soundly. She smiles as she realizes that he is a very decent guy. Some time later, they wait for the family to leave the house, and go back in through the back door. Inside, they find a picture of the woman, and realize it's her parents' house. They check the computer and finally find her name and address. Ellie decides to get a change of clothes while they are in the house. They take some of the cash which is lying around, and Danny grabs some food from the refrigerator and makes them some sandwiches to go. Ellie comes in dressed in a pretty dress and hands him a shirt. Dressed and ready, they grab 2 bicycles from the garage and ride away. They enjoy the cool breeze and the feeling of being free as they cruise through the posh green neighborhood on their bikes. They get to the train station and eat sandwiches while they wait for the train to take them back to New York. They talk and joke around comfortably with each other now, almost like friends. Back in New York, they stake out the woman, Vanessa, at her workplace. Danny calls home and asks to speak to Darren or his mom, but instead gets to speak to Russell, who asks him to keep an eye out for Vanessa while he sends someone over. Russell tells Darren that Ellie will get his share too. Darren goes to the restroom, secretly calls up Vanessa's office, and speaks to her. He asks her to get the briefcase, as he needs some important papers from it. She agrees. Darren asks Russell to let him step out to run an errand, but Russell refuses to let him leave. At the same time, Vanessa steps out with the briefcase, and Danny and Ellie see her. They follow her. After a while, back at the apartment, Russell picks up the call, and it's Danny. He informs him that they've got the briefcase. He is surprised. Danny explains how she stepped out, and they started following her, as they were worried she might take it to the police station. We go into a flashback and see that Danny and Ellie follow her as she gets to the subway with the case and rides to a particular station, unaware that she is going to meet Darren. Danny decides to approach her when they get off the train at the station. Ellie stays back, hidden, as she is wearing Vanessa's mother's dress that they stole from the house. When Danny approaches Vanessa, she assumes he's the same guy who called her, as she recognizes him from the previous day, and happily hands over the briefcase, even as Danny apologizes about taking her bag by mistake. Danny looks at her in shock as she just hands over the case, wishes him luck with his meeting, and leaves. He and Ellie laugh as they walk out with the case. Back to the present, Russell asks them to come to the motel with it. Danny asks to speak to Darren. Darren speaks to Danny in Polish so that Russell and the guys do not understand. He explains to Danny that he needs to come home with the case and not go to the motel with Ellie, as she plans to take their share. Danny defends Ellie, saying she is nice and sweet, but Darren explains that she is doing that on purpose, as Scott promised her Darren's share if she brought Danny along. Danny is upset hearing this, and as they walk back, he thinks over what he has learned. Ellie notices he is upset and asks about it. He lies to her that he got fired. She asks him to not go to the motel with her, and rather give her the bag, so she can finish the deal and meet with him later. He assumes that she is trying to double-cross him, and lies to her about having to call his manager. He steps away from her to make the call. Ellie watches him cross the street to make the call, and he pretends to pick up the payphone, but gets on the bus when it stops by. She realizes he is running away, and rushes after the bus. She runs along with it, trying to catch it. Danny is heartbroken at her betrayal. When the bus stops, Ellie gets on it. Danny looks at her, places the case on the seat, and leaves the bus. She grabs the case and steps off the bus, looks for him, and finds him walking away. She turns the other way and continues down with the bag. She realizes he may have found out about her deal. She contemplates what happened as she makes her way to the motel. She looks at his ID card, still in her possession, and feels sad. Danny gets home, dejected. His mom hugs him, while Darren berates him for giving up the briefcase. Ellie meets Scott, who sends her in a car with Russell to make the drop. At home, Darren informs Danny that Ellie will never be able to leave. She will be stuck doing what she has been doing up until now. Danny tells him off, which angers him, and he throws a lit cigarette at his back. Danny gets burned by it, but picks up the butt and flushes it down the toilet. He looks at the water, flushing it down and contemplating his own life. In his lost state, he burns the dish he is cooking, which sets off the fire alarm and angers his mom. He seems completely done with his life and situation. Meanwhile, Russell takes Ellie to a rich woman's house. In a beautiful house overlooking the bay, the woman asks Ellie to set the briefcase down. She opens it and removes a painting from the inside. She shares with Ellie that it was the only thing her lawyer had said she could not get in the divorce, so she got it another way. Ellie is amused by the story. The woman pays her $3,000. Ellie leaves, bemused by the whole thing. At home, Danny's mother berates him for his distracted state. He hears a knock and looks up to find Ellie at his door. They smile at each other. His mother asks her who she is, and Ellie lies to her that her name is Rebecca Vargas. Danny laughs and plays along. He reminds his mom that they went to school together. He takes her up to his room. She splits the money with him and asks him not to share it with his brother. He asks about her plans. She informs him that she will go to Pittsburgh, as she owes Ricky. Danny realizes she is just trying to make excuses and does not say anything, but Ellie can see it on his face. He just shakes his head and hands her his Metro card without saying a word. He gives it to her as he wants her to keep something to remember him by. Ellie leaves and goes to the subway station. She gets on the train and thinks about Danny. While at home, Danny thinks about her. He looks at the burnt dish in the kitchen and suddenly gets to a resolution in his head. Determined, he grabs the money and puts on the stolen shirt. He grabs some of his other stuff, like clothes and a picture of his family. He says goodbye to his mom and takes off running. He gets to the subway, but does not have his card, so asks an older man for his, in exchange for a $100 bill. The man is skeptical, but agrees to swipe him in. On the train, he looks around at all the passengers and smiles to himself, feeling happy about finally having the courage to leave. Ellie arrives at the bus terminal and inquires about tickets to Pittsburgh, but changes her mind at the last minute and buys tickets for Providence instead. Danny gets off the train and runs at full speed toward the bus terminal. He finds Ellie, who is equally shocked to see him there. He asks her if he can go with her to Pittsburgh. She informs him that she is not going to Pittsburgh anymore, but to Providence instead. He asks if he can go with her, and she agrees happily. He leans in to kiss her, but she is taken aback and looks at him in surprise. She apologizes for causing him to misunderstand. She asks him if he still wishes to go with her, and he agrees. She discusses the kiss with him, explaining that she looks at them going together as a start to something new and different, not a romantic attachment. Danny is fine with the arrangement, looking forward to a new start too. And they both smile nervously but happily, excited to start this new chapter together.